I want to begin today's broadcast by saying that when you're into business, it is absolutely necessary to be able to manage risk. Risk mitigation is an essential part of doing business. Today, what I want to do, I want to do a deep dive into looking at some critical aspect of risk analysis as it relates to real estate investment and what are things to look for in the risk mitigation process? Of course, today we will do a high level overview and we will be assessing risk from different angles. For example, we will look at risk associated with the real estate portfolio itself and risk associated with capital access, capital leverage, and debt mitigation. So let's get the ball rolling today. Now, in case you are joining this program for the first time or viewing this program for the first time, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. All right, so you will be the first to know when we are on air with these broadcasts. This program comes to you with the kind compliments of Pitch Deck, Global Capital Inc., and 10X B&M LLC out of New York. Our ultimate vision is to provide you, the investor, provide you, the consumer, with critical information that allows you to be a little bit more educated, a little bit more informed as to how you go about the investment process. So, today I want to talk about real estate investment and risk mitigation. There are multiple moving parts to real estate investment. And the reality is that there are risks lurking all over this process. When you really take the time to understand real estate, the moving parts, it will be much easier for you to see some of those risks associated with real estate investment. Now, what I will do, I will identify some of those moving parts and I will do a deep dive into one of them, and then I will do the risk mitigation analysis. Now, some of the moving parts that is necessary for you to consider when you're getting into the space of real estate investment, you need to look at things like appraisal. You need to recognize that the appraisal is not the beginning and the end. You need to think about the 10, 20% equity that you need to get into this investment as part of your personal pool or equity into that investment portfolio. Now, yes, that is subjective depending if you're going through traditional commercial banks or if you go using FHA. FHA may have a different window or a different access point of a different setup that it allows you to access the capital by simply fronting between 3.5% and 5%, which is perhaps about 15% lower than the traditional bank. These are things that you need to know if you get it into these particular space as a private individual now tapping into this space, or perhaps even as an investor, because these are different avenues that you can use to leverage. But let's think a little deeper here. Let's go a little deeper here. The appraisal process is absolutely necessary. All right. There are a lot of risks lurking in the dark right here. Now, it's not enough to just focus on the things that I've talked about, because what I'm seeing is that there are many persons, I get many calls from persons who simply save up the percentage, the equity that they need to make their first purchase, but they didn't think about things like attorney fee. That is necessary. All right. There are risks lurking here because if you sign off on a deal, perhaps you put your 10 or 20% up front and then you approach the bank, but you didn't have the proper legal representation to point you in the right direction, you can lose that money. All right. Later on, I'll get into all of that. How about inspection fee? Failing to do the inspection fee, there are risks lurking in the dark right here. And the last thing that you want to do is to leave yourself exposed to risk. So you need to understand how to mitigate this. So you need to make preparation for this. There's also what we call the underwriting. Or, you need to ensure that you have a budget for underwriting which is absolutely necessary. There's also the origination. So, investing in real estate, you need to take the time to understand these moving parts and to be able to, from the get go, recognize risk and where those risks are lurking. All right. Now, there are many other moving parts. Today, I just want to give you a brief overview, a high level overview of things that you should think about when you're getting into the real estate investment space. Now, let us go a little deeper, sink a little deeper into, let us do the Titanic into what we call the appraisal process. And today I want to talk about what we call the sales comparison analytics. Yes, there's a concept in the appraisal techniques that is best known, well known as the sales comparison analytics. Now, what exactly does this represent? Again, this represents many moving parts. And as a novice, a new person's getting into real estate investment, it is necessary to take the time to understand this because this can save you sleepless nights and stress when you have all the right information. Information is king, all right? Now, or queen. So, you don't have to feel left out of this. Now, let's focus on this in a very serious way. The sales comparison approach or analytics simply means that you're taking a number of factors into consideration. For example, you're looking at things like property type. You're looking at things like property use. And these are things that you need to really understand. And if you follow some of my previous broadcasts, you would understand why. All right. You're looking at things like the age of the building. You're looking at things like the size of the building, the conditions of the buildings. You're looking at things like, terms and conditions for the sale. You're looking at things like upgrade and enhancements. All of these things are necessary for you to look at. Now, and let's go into this just a little bit. And I keep saying this. As a real estate investor, you want to make money when you make the purchase. You want to buy not because it's cheap. You want to buy because it makes a whole lot of sense. All right, a whole lot of sense. But you don't know if it makes a whole lot of sense unless you understand these critical issues that is being discussed today. All right. So you need to take the time to get some skin in the game to understand all of this, or you need to get a subject matter expert on your side to help you mitigate this entire process, depending on where you are in the world. All right. So the property type and the property use are important to look at. Now, in terms of the property use, and I'm going to be brief here, let us suppose that someone is doing the appraisal, but you're in a residential community. But in the residential community, you are leveraging your estate as an income property. The person who is actually doing the appraisal may not necessarily know that. You might be legally doing this also, but the appraiser may not know this. So guess what happens here? They leverage the sales comparison analytics and didn't take into consideration some concept that we call the income capitalization analytics. And the income capitalization, largely based on the fact that this is an income property, will simply drive up the value of the estate. In the case of you're selling, all right? So this too is something for you to look at because you may buy it cheap, you may renovate, and then you drive the cost up. But you instead of putting the estate back to the market as a residential estate, you put it to the market as an income property. And because you put it to the market as an income property, the evaluation, the appraisal is much higher. If you don't know this, you lose money here. And as a private equity investor that invest in real estate, you don't want to leave the negotiation table and leave money on the table. That's not how we do it. All right. So there are risks all throughout this entire process, and you need to understand it. Now, I want to just shift gears a little bit, but just before I shift gears into other areas of risk, I want to summarize this. Now, let us suppose that you cover all bases as you get into the real estate investment market, meaning that you were able to look at things like the appraisal fees. You were able to look at things like, the appraisal, you look at things like attorney fees, you look at things like origination fee, you look at things like inspection fees, you look at things like underwriting fees. You're able to cover those bases. You cover the basis of things like title search, and you cover the basis of things like the PMI. Now let's say you cover all of this and you're safe. You're safe in the zone here because you cover this. You minimize the risk here. Are there risks that still exist in the real estate investment process? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. So I'm going to shift this gear now to show you some other areas of risk. And this is what I want you to visualize. I want you to visualize that you are now moving to acquire an acre of land, all right, with estate on it. And the primary focus of acquiring this estate is to dismantle the existing estate and rebuild. The big question that you want to ask yourself here, and if you don't ask yourself these questions, you can be exposed to risk. For example, any attempt to acquire this estate, to develop this estate, is going to take you between, let us say, 12 to 18 months to fully develop the estate, depending on the size of, performing assets that you're going to be building out there. Now, as you take this into consideration, you want to ask yourself if which financial instrument is best for you. Now we have a multiple of this. You have debt, you have equity, you have credit. All right. Perhaps you need to also put in the mix smart capital leverage too. All right, we'll tell you about that later on. But all of these are the financial mix. Which is best for you? Now, taking into consideration what I would have said earlier, you are investing in the estate, you will dismantle the physical infrastructures on the estate, and you will build back from scratch because you want to build to appeal to a specific demographic, an affluent, community, foreign direct investment is coming in, is opening up, and you want to capitalize on this. Which financial portfolio or instrument is best for you? Some might want to say debt, but are you serious? Some might want to say credit. Are you serious? And now just let me explain some of this. When you attempt to take a debt instrument to put into a performing asset that has a delay cash flow gratification, let's call it that, meaning that it's not going to cash flow immediately. It's going to cash flow anytime after 12 to 18 months. There's a number of things for you to consider here. If your pocket is not deep, you got risk here, all painted all over this, and you need to be aware of this. Why am I saying this? Because when you take debt as a debt leverage, as a tool to leverage to acquire the estate, you're going to have monthly obligations. You will have to pay principal plus interest. All right, principal plus interest. In a developed world, you may have more than this to look at. All right, you may have to have a special type of insurance to go alongside these investment portfolio. Now, principal of an interest is a monthly debt obligation. And if you're not seeing this as as a risk and you don't have deep pocket, believe me, it is a risk. So these are things that you need to think ahead, see beyond the problems, and be able to take the kind of action that helps to mitigate the entire investment portfolio. Because the last thing that you want to do is that you do all the due diligence on one side, and that's to ensure that you have the equity necessary to start the process. You do the appraisal, you have the attorney fee, you have the underwriting fee. You have all of these systems all set up. You cover the bases. You did, a big thumbs up in all of these different areas. But guess what? You didn't do the financial leverage mitigation. So here is where you need to really stop to really ask yourself if a particular financial instrument is good for you or you need a financial mix. To take debt on this entire portfolio alone is not a smart investment decision unless your pocket is very, very deep. And if even your pocket is very deep, my friend, what we at Pitch Deck 101, Global Capital Inc., 10X B&M LLC out of New York, know about financial leverage, financial instrument is not the smartest things to do. When you take a debt, you want to know that you can cash flow that debt within the shortest possible time. And 12 to 18 months is not the shortest possible time. All right. So there are risks here. You're losing capital here. And the last thing that you want to do in business is to lose capital. You don't want to lose capital. So, which instrument might be better for you? Is it credit? One may want to say yes. Credit, if you understand what you're doing when you're playing in the credit space, you may be able to acquire credit at 0% APR. What? 0% APR? That's like magic in your hands. If you're able to acquire large sums of capital with 0% APR for this long period of time, because sometimes it happened at 6, 12, or 18 months, perhaps it's something for you to think about. This is what I'm going to throw in here. Solid investors that really understand financial instruments, that really understand how to play the game, they will have credit capital, business credit, as a form of capital access. And if you never heard me say this before, I'm going to say it now. You have the biggest supermarket in the world, Walmart. They have over 500 trade lines. Yes, 500 trade lines. They're able to stock their entire, you know, super mall, stock it out, and not have to worry where the cash is going to come from because they're able to leverage business credit. All right, and by the time it reached that point to interest accumulation or the debt to accrued interest, they already offset that. All right. So I'm just saying that these are important concepts for you to think about when you are getting into real estate investment and you want to really take the time to mitigate risk. The best instrument that I would normally talk about here is what we call the equity. Yeah, equity. Why equity is important? And in the equity space, you may be able to tap into angel, you may be able to tap into the VC venture capitalists, you may be able to tap into private equity investors, you may have a joint venture partner. You have all of these different players that may come alongside you because you have a bankable project, you have a fundable project, you have done the due diligence, the market analysis, and you understand the space that you're playing in. So you're now able to bring serious investors on board with you to help you move a process of cash flow maximization forward. Which instrument is best for you? If you don't know this, you're exposing yourself to risk. And as an entrepreneur, you want to know that you're able to mitigate risk because if you're not mitigating risk, you're going to lose a whole lot of money. A whole lot of money. You're going to have stress and sleepless nights. And you know what's going to happen from there? Your blood pressure going to start to rise. That's not what you want. All right? That's not what you want. So I trust today's concepts that we have looked at really help you. The last thing that I want to throw in here is that as you look at real estate investment and risk mitigation, it is really necessary that you take the time to understand financial instruments. This is what's going to be your game changer. The last element that I want to add here is smart capital. Yes, perhaps you might have never heard about it. But the major difference with all of these instruments is that smart capital, once you raise those capital, they're your capital. So they're yours to leverage to any way you want to leverage it. And I would want to believe that you leverage it as a instrument to mitigate the debt process. To mitigate the debt process. All right, so that's it for today. So let's let me do a quick summary. We talk about risk associated with real estate investment, and we look at it from two standpoints. We look at it at all the risk associated in the pre-purchase, and we look at it at all the risk or some of the risk associated with leveraging financial instruments. All right, so there you had it. I want to give a little icing here today as I close out today's program. I'm seeing many persons across the world very often talk about debt mitigation and stay out of debt. Is that the right thing to do? Is that the right thing to say? And I want to say this is not a clear-cut answer for this. I want to say yes and no. If it is that you just want to exit debt and to be comfortable that you are debt-free, just to, get, some adrenaline rush because of doing that, perhaps yes. But if your focus is on building wealth to cash flow maximize, to create generational wealth and perhaps intergenerational wealth, debt avoidance is the most absurd thing for you to perhaps think about. You need debt, a whole lot of debt, but just don't get into debt if you don't understand how to play the debt mitigation, process. The smartest people, the wealthiest people in the world, they understand debt mitigation. So if you want to be among some of the smartest people who are building wealth across the world, take the time to understand debt. If you don't have the time to do this, get a PFA, a professional financial advisor that can come alongside you and really work with you to really help you to understand how to bounce that ball around, how to navigate the process, how to navigate that car to avoid an accident. The last thing that you want is an accident. The last thing that you want to do when you're going into these spaces to expose yourself to risk. You don't want to invest in a real estate portfolio and it got risk lurking all over you. And I want you to look back at some of the programs that we talk about. You have things like physical depreciation. How does all of those things affect the portfolio? You have functional obsolescence. How does all of those things affect the portfolio? You have economic obsolescence. How does all of these things affect the portfolio? So in getting into this space, you want to be certain that you are informed or at least have people alongside you that understand how the game is played. Now, I want to encourage you, if you find this kind of information interesting, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. I would so much appreciate that. It will help our algorithm, to reach more people. Our mission here is just to provide you with this content of information, these content of information that will help you to make better business decision, better investment decision. In the event that you're joining me for the first time, my name is Gary Thompson. I'm a business development consultant by profession. I'm a humanitarian by nature and the self-published author for several books, including 10X Branding and Marketing Blueprint, The Psychology of Money, and Impact Marketing and Branding, just to name some of my books. I want to encourage you to go to my website, the company's website, which is pitchdeck101.org. It's showing right to your screen right now, pitchdeck101.org. Find our contact page. Send us the word mastermind, mastermind, and you too can come into our mastermind community where you can start to learn how to build a brand and have global impact and how to build a brand and cash flow like a pro. My name is Gary Thompson, and I wish you all the best for today's Monday and the rest of this week. We have a beautiful sunshine here in the Caribbean, and I wish this sunshine comes upon you, not only upon you, but in your heart, so you will smile for the rest of your life. Be blessed. See you soon.